Welcome to Kensho Quest. In this video, I'm going to share tips for layering wool clothing for cold winter weather. Our family normally travels in hot tropical climates, but this winter we brought our kids to snowy Hokkaido, Japan, so they could experience the snow for the very first time. This meant I needed to research how to dress them properly. I'm new to this, but I'll share with you what I've learned. Each of my kids has one warm outfit to wear out in the snow, and then they can wear pieces of those outfits while we're inside our Airbnb. Daytime temperatures have ranged from about 1 degree Celsius and sunny down to about -7 degrees Celsius and breezy. I've talked about this in other videos, but I personally love wool. I love that it's a natural, renewable, biodegradable fiber. I love that it wicks away sweat, so it's great in both hot and cold weather. I love that it's snuggly and soft. As the one who does the laundry while we're traveling, I love that it's easy to wash and dry. I mostly machine wash it, but also if I have just one item that needs to be washed, it's easy enough to hand wash it. It dries well without any of that musty, moldy smell that cotton clothes can sometimes have. It is just an all-around great thing to have in a travel wardrobe, whether you're in hot or cold climates. There are 3 basic layers to wear when dressing for the cold. The first is the base layer, which is closest to the skin. The purpose of the base layer is to wick away sweat so that your skin remains dry. You don't want to be damp and cold. Merino wool is a perfect fiber for this. It's soft, so it can be worn directly against the skin, and it also naturally has this wicking property. For the top portion of their base layer, each of my kids has a long sleeve wool shirt, 100% merino wool. I have a 9-year-old son, 4-year-old daughter, and almost 2-year-old son. My oldest has one from Bumby wool, so this is made from a thin interlock wool fabric. My daughter has 2 shirts. These are by Truly Curious, and they're from a thinner jersey fabric. So this does perform the wicking feature of wicking the sweat away, but these do not really give her any warmth being this thin. And my youngest has a shirt also by Truly Curious, but this is in their lightweight interlock wool, so it's a lot similar of a thickness to this. These do provide a little bit of warmth. I absolutely love this shirt. My son always wears it going out, but at home I sometimes have him wear his thinner jersey one that he's outgrowing, just because at meal times I'd rather him get this shirt dirty and keep this one clean since he's got to wear the same shirt every day. Then for the bottom half of their base layer, my oldest 2 have joggers by the brand Explore. It's a little bit higher GSM or grams per square meter than their base layers are, and I wanted that little bit extra warmth for my kids. Then for my youngest, at first I was just having him wear 2 other layers, then we did add in an additional 3rd layer, so these as his really base layer closest to the skin. These are by Truly Curious. They're jersey, so they're thin. The reason I added these to his outfit is he was getting kind of cold when we went out, and I realized that his pants he wears over are kind of loose around the ankles, so cold air could go up into his pants and chill his legs. So I really do like having something with a tight ankle, like a jogger style like this, to just really block out the cold air from getting to his skin. And the base layer, I guess you'd also count things like beanies. I got my older 2 a couple nice thin ones out of the t-shirt material from Bumby wool. However, they didn't wear them too often. My daughter was more likely to wear it to help hold the hair out of her face while she was sledding. My son, he didn't really use it. And for my youngest, he has one of these balaclavas by Bumby wool. This is out of a bit thicker wool than the beanies are. I thought this would be good to give him really good protection, you know, keep his cheeks covered and stuff, but he never really wore this out and about. It's kind of hard to get kids to keep things on their heads. And their socks as well. They each got a really thick pair of wool blend socks from Montbell, which is an outdoor gear and clothing brand based out of Osaka, Japan. I do wish they had had 2 of these each. Sometimes my youngest would get his feet wet on the way out the door, and I didn't want him going out in wet socks, so I would change him to his thinner Lamington merino wool socks, and those were just not keeping their feet warm enough. Next comes the mid layer and any additional insulating layers. The purpose of these is to trap body heat and keep you warm. For the top portion of their mid layer, each of my kids has a merino wool hoodie. My 2 oldest have hoodies by Explore. These came as part of the jogger sets, along with the joggers that they're using as their base layer. This part they're using as the mid layer. So this provides a bit of warmth, a bit of insulation over their long sleeve t-shirt. My kids also wore their Explore jogger sets as their loungewear around the house. So when we got home, they could take off their outer layers but keep their jogging suits on. Sometimes just a t-shirt on top for their pajamas at night, because it's not great having a hood on pajamas. For my youngest, his outfit is a little bit different than the rest. From Explore, he just has an adventure onesie. Originally, I thought he might wear this as part of his outfit going out, but I realized it was just gonna be kind of a pain if I had to take him to the bathroom or change his diaper. So instead, he wears every single night as his pajamas. As soon as he changed into this, he knew he was getting ready for bed. It does have a double zip, so you can unzip from the top, and then for diaper changes, or using the potty, you can also unzip from the bottom. Instead, for his top portion of his mid layer, he has a hoodie by Bumby Wool, and this is a heavy duty thick wool. They have a few different types of wool that they use. This one is referred to as Durasoft, and it is a thicker one because I wanted something that was going to be really good out in the snow. To move on to the mid layer on the bottom half. Now for my oldest two kids, they only wore 2 layers on the bottom half. Often you don't need as many layers because, especially kids running around, jumping, playing, they're producing that body heat and keeping themselves warm. So my oldest two were fine with just 2 layers on the bottom. We already looked at their base layer. Then for the mid layer, they have interlock wool pants. So these ones are by Truly Caris. They're out of the wool that they refer to as 97% wool, 3% spandex, and this is a little bit thinner than the heavyweight wool that they often use. That's one reason I wanted a little bit thicker layer underneath them instead of really thin base layer. I wanted to make sure my kids were warm enough, and my 2 oldest never complained about their legs being cold. This always worked out really well. Again, I got a jogger style here to come in at the ankles. They're a little bit more roomy on the ankle than I expected, and I got them 2 inches long on my kids so that we could easily cuff them up, and if we go to the snow again a year from now, hopefully these should still fit them. One thing that happens with this interlock being the outermost layer is that the snow clings to it. They end up looking like a fluffy snow bunny, but it doesn't affect the function of it. If it was kind of warmer day, the snow would cling to it, melt off. The pants might feel a little bit damp on the outside, but they never got saturated. They never said they were cold. When we'd come home, they might feel just a little bit wet. Hang them up on a chair to dry, and they'd be dry really fast. So the snow doesn't soak in and make them really wet. On a colder day, the snow would stick and then turn into like little ice balls, and you could either brush off the ice balls, or again, when those eventually melted, the pants were still fine. So this was a great test to see how it works wearing wool on the outside. It works for the warmth, it works for repelling the snow, but it does look a little bit different being coated in snow versus if you were wearing an outer layer of like waterproof rain pants on the outside, then the snow wouldn't stick to those, it would just go right off. Function-wise though, wool on the outside worked perfectly fine. My daughter has a pair of joggers by Truly Caris, and this is out of their heavyweight material, so I knew that her pants were gonna be a bit thicker and a bit warmer than the boys' pants. I wanted to mention real quick about lanolin and lanolizing wool. So sheep naturally have a greasy substance on their wool called lanolin, and that helps to repel the water and the snow. So it helps make it more water repellent. So often people will say if you're wearing wool as the outermost layer in the snow, to lanolize it really well, that will help repel the water. For some reason, we didn't seem to have this experience. When we first got there, I had pretty much no time to prepare. We opened our box of wool, wanted to get the kids out in the snow the next day, so I sent them out without having lanolized their pants like I had originally intended to. The pants worked just fine like that. Eventually, I got around to a chance where I did soak them in a lanolin bath. I can link below some videos that explain that process. But basically, the next day, they felt dry to the touch. I had them wear them out, and I don't know if it was the lanolin or the conditions, but that day, their pants seemed to get more saturated and more wet instead of getting less wet. It could have been that it was a sunnier, warmer day, and the snow was melting more easily, and that's what caused it. But I don't know, when they had lanolin on them, they didn't seem to perform any better with repelling the wetness than how they had done without the lanolin. I don't know. Now for my youngest, he was wearing 3 layers on the bottom. He had his very thin jersey base layer. Then next he had his joggers. So these are the 97.3 by Truly Carious. He had these next. Then over his joggers, he had a pair of Bumby wool pants. These are normally a bit big on him, but it totally worked layering them over other layers. And these are such a wide leg design that I knew the cold air could go right up. So I knew wearing these just on their own would not be quite enough. Up next, we have what we could call either an additional mid layer or an insulating layer. For the insulating layer for each of my older two, they have a puffy jacket. These are not truly waterproof on the outside, so these are really just for retaining the heat, for keeping you warm, providing insulation. My son's is filled with a synthetic material and my daughter's is filled with down. They did, however, keep them very warm. They were more often complaining of being too hot, not really ever complaining about being cold on top when they had on their mid layer plus this insulating layer. For my youngest, I tried to stick more to the natural fibers, sticking with the wool. His insulating layer is this boiled wool jacket by Desana. Good, nice, thick insulation. The hood is also nice to help keep him warm, especially since he never really wore his balaclava hoodie that I got him. I also really like these comfortable wrists, how it has this extra material here sticking out for the wrist. I sometimes use this just as his outer piece. Again, the snow would stick to it, but it would melt off. He seemed to always be warm enough. Then the final third layer is outerwear. The purpose of outerwear is to block the wind and to block wetness from rain or snow. For their outerwear, each of my kids had just a rain jacket protecting their upper half. We went with just straight up rain jackets, so windproof, waterproof, but also some breathability so that the sweat doesn't get totally trapped inside. We did not choose a winter jacket that would have had the waterproof outside plus some insulation inside because I wanted something they could keep using when we return to tropical hot weather. So this is just simply blocking the wetness and blocking the wind. At first, when I was planning their wardrobes, I couldn't quite get my head around why you needed windproof. I kept thinking, like, if they're really warm and snuggly and all these layers of wool, isn't that good enough? Until we went out to view the white illumination Christmas lights, and it was about -7 Celsius and breezy, and the wind was just like going through my clothes, and it was so cold. And then I finally understood the purpose of that outer layer to block the wind. I like the reflectors on these. I liked getting my daughter a super bright pink one so we could always spot her on the slopes when we were out sledding or snow tubing. The rain jackets I got from my older two, they did mention that they were intended to be as outerwear, so they're sized kind of generously to fit over other layers. However, I got them just exactly their size based on their height, whereas their puffy jackets we had sized up a bit, hoping they would last them a couple years. So rain jackets weren't completely covering their puffy jackets. I would say go either you're sizing up on everything or you're keeping exactly their size on everything. For my youngest, he got a rain jacket by the same brand, but his is a little bit fancier, more features. He does have pockets on the front. We did have one issue with this, with the wrists being too tight. If you have the opportunity to have your kid try on all their layers at once, I highly recommend it, because once we put on thick snow gloves and then he's got his sweater, he's got his wool coat, then I thought he'd be wearing this over his wool coat. It just ended up being way too tight on his wrist, cutting off the circulation, and then his hands would get colder faster. So because of that, he didn't often wear both the wool jacket plus this one because it just didn't work around the wrists. So sometimes he'd wear just all wool and this would be his outer layer. Sometimes if it was a bit sunnier and he didn't need as much warmth, he would wear this on the outside, but you really need to make sure that the layers are going to work together. Also in the category of outerwear is boots. So for my oldest two, I got lined rain boots. I wanted something that still had some flexibility compared to a lot of snow boots have just a really rigid sole, and that's about the opposite of the barefoot type shoes we normally wear. So I had heard that by getting the rain boots that are also insulated, so they had a wool blend insulation inside for warmth, can give you at least a little bit more flexibility. At first my kids were tucking their pants into their boots because there was a cord you could cinch and tie. However, they weren't always cinching and tying it, and also even with that kind of cinched at the top, sometimes snow would still go down into their boot, and almost every night we were having to dry the inside of their boots near the heater. So it finally occurred to me that we could have them wear their thick wool pants on the outside of their boots, and that worked so much better keeping the snow out of the boots. Now for my youngest, we weren't sure if those tall rain boots would be too awkward for him to walk in, so we got him booties from the same brand, Mick line. From the description on the website, I really couldn't tell. Are these intended to be worn alone? They just put these on over their socks, wear them out in the snow? Are they intended to be worn over shoes? I was having him wear these over thick wool socks, and that was not keeping his feet warm enough. It finally occurred to me that they are probably meant to be worn over the wool booties that brand also sells. So this alone did not work out for us. I wish I'd just got him the same old rain boots I got my older two. Instead, we picked up a pair of rain boots locally, which were not great. The really thick sole tended to fall off his feet, and even those weren't really keeping his feet warm enough. My oldest two, their feet were fine. Even when they come in slightly damp, my son would be like, my feet aren't cold, they're fine. But with my youngest, it seemed like he always had cold feet. The main bases of their outfits worked out excellent. I was really happy about them. The accessories is where we just couldn't seem to get it figured out. I also got wool gloves for some of my kids. With the wool, it works at first when they're playing in the snow, but eventually they do get wet and saturated. So I had heard other people putting like rain gloves over, and I wish I had gotten those. I was hoping that the wool alone would be good enough, but since it would get saturated, I also bought my kids just like waterproof snow gloves. My daughter had a pair from Costco. Worked out great. Those were really nice. They were like mittens, purple ones. My son and I got some just cheaper ones at stores locally, and they did not keep our hands warm. They weren't insulated enough. For my youngest, he had this wool pair, and originally what he didn't like about it is they had kind of an elastic cord hooking the two together, and you'd run that through the sweater, and then you wouldn't lose your mittens. He hated that. Once I cut the cord off, he was happy with these, but I would monitor him, and once they would start feeling wet, I would switch him out to a different pair of gloves. I got him an actual pair of snow gloves that was waterproof, insulated and all. Those did not even keep his hands warm. I think, again, from it being too tight on his wrist wasn't helping, and snow gloves is something we didn't quite figure out. Let me know your wisdom. So to wrap it up, base layer to wick the sweat away from the skin and keep you dry. Mid layer and possibly additional insulating layers to trap in the body heat, keep you warm. Outer layer to keep out the wind and keep out the wetness. I hope you have a wonderful time out there in the snow. Yeah! Snowball ambush! I'm gonna get you. Oh no, get out, dude.